Hello, this is Pete from acethecase.com, and I am chatting through some key tips to help you ace your case successfully. And these are the 13 tips that come up the most often when I'm coaching people through their case interviews, the things that come up again and again and again. So there's 13 in total, a lucky number, going across 4 phases. That is preparation, opening the case, navigating your way through the case, and then finally wrapping it up. So let's get started. The first point is just to practice. Contrary to popular belief, the people who get the jobs at the top firms are not only smart, but they also practice a lot. It's a lot like Carnegie Hall. How do you get into McKinsey, Bain, or BCG? Practice, practice, practice. And I recommend roping in anyone and everyone you can into practicing. Ideally, it will be former consultants who've been through the process themselves, but you should also get other people who want to get consulting jobs, your friends, your girlfriend, boyfriend, roommates, anyone you can grab, or of course a coach from acethecase.com I would also recommend to give a professional ear to you. And also, your whole life can provide little pieces of fodder or inspiration for potential cases. You go into a coffee shop and you can ask yourself, I wonder how much business this shop does in a year. And you think about, well, I see about 8 people right now. The average size of an order might be about $5. They're open for 12 hours a day, and you can just run the math, and you can do that to many different things to help get yourself in sort of the mental mindset or framework. And here's a quick hint right up front. If you're not enjoying the process of doing these cases, the kind of problem-solving nature of what you're doing, you're probably not going to enjoy the real job when it comes up, because it really is a good little snapshot for the sorts of thought process that consultants do all the time. The next tip is to, before the case, really do whatever you need to do personally to be fully engaged, rocking out just at your personal best. A case interview, in a way, is kind of like a speech in that you're orally delivering things, and it's kind of like a standardized test in that you're thinking really hard. So you want to do all the sorts of things you might do before a big presentation or a big test so that you feel fully mentally energized. Sleep well. Don't spend hours and hours the night before practicing cases instead of getting a good night's sleep. Eat well, hydrate well, breathe, get the right amount of caffeine going in your system so that you're feeling alive and raring to go. Find a place right near the case interview location so you're there nice and early and not stressed out or worried that you're going to be late anyway, so you can just waltz in there calmly just a little bit early and feel really good. Getting in that zone is important. Next, once you are in the beginning of the case situation, one has been handed to you, it's time to listen very closely to what the interviewer is asking of you. I recommend you really perk up your attention and hear as much as you possibly can. Take good notes. Sometimes a very small phrase in the upfront setup can make a huge difference. Is the client we're talking about a manufacturer, a wholesaler, or a retailer, for example, of electrical equipment? Makes a massive difference. Do they engage in both sales and service? Well, make a good note of that so that you look at both sides of that business. And then recap that situation right back to that interviewer in terms of what you're hearing and what you're trying to solve, but don't sound like a total parrot in the process. Once you got that, you want to make sure you drive into getting crystal clarity on exactly what they're asking you to solve. What are you figuring out for them? And try and figure out what they're up to. What's the goal? Sometimes it's revenue, sometimes it's valuation, sometimes it's market share, sometimes it's a profit, any different kind of profit. Make sure you're really clear on what we're trying to maximize. What are we trying to do here? In as much clarity as possible. And bear in mind, if the question says, should the client do some sort of initiative, that's really a code phrase for, will that course of action be optimal subject to any of the above? Or will that make money for us? Or will that make more money than the alternatives available on the table for us? That's what the word should means, so be careful to really drive into that. I also really recommend asking this magical question, which is, are there any other objectives I should be concerned with? And that's fantastic because that often forces the interviewer to give you a massive hint. Either they'll say, no, all we care about is market share. Or they'll give you a free bonus. They're like, well, market share is important, but we also want to make sure our profitability stays in line. So I highly recommend that question as well. Next up, before you really start thinking about how you're going to structure it, I'd ask if you have any wild, big, upfront, global, clarifying questions, ask them. And when I say global, I mean sort of high-stakes things as opposed to asking them for any sort of very specific data point. You want to say, are we talking about the client operating on just in the United States or on a global scale? What exactly is that product? I'm not familiar with. Make sure you have a sense for what you're really talking about. Don't be shy about asking those questions before you start pondering how you're going to approach things. Next, you just ask the question, which is, may I have a few moments to collect my thoughts? And they always say yes. And this time is precious. And to give you a guideline, I'd say 15 seconds is too short. 3 minutes is awkwardly long. So just somewhere in there, just a very rough guideline. And then at this point, you want to neatly write all the ideas and hypotheses you might have for how to go about approaching and solving this case. Write down everything that occurs to you while it's fresh. And indeed, these will be valuable to you to refer back later when you get kind of stuck and you've gone down the wrong track. You can look back to these notes when the case was fresh and say, oh wait, I had this idea. And so you can pursue that. So take advantage of this time to really write it down and then think about how you might organize these hypotheses and thoughts and ideas you have into a couple categories or a structure to offer. Which is the next point. You want to lead your interviewer with a preview of where you're going to go. And so if you've done some research on case interviews, you may have heard of some of the useful frameworks out there. There's Porter's 5 Forces, the 5 C's, the 4 P's, any of these sorts of things. And those can be useful, but really, really, really never try to force fit a framework that doesn't quite fit for the question you're being asked. If they're asking a specific operational question, don't try and analyze the attractiveness of the industry with Porter's 5 Forces. It just kind of indicates that you're not using your own brain and thinking through what's being asked of you. So generally, you can be fine by just laying out a preview approach of how you're going to look at things without following some sort of pre-scripted framework. You can say, it can be as simple as, profit equals revenue minus cost. First, I want to take a look at the revenue picture in terms of volume and price. Then I want to take a closer look at the cost side in terms of both fixed costs and variable costs. That's a fine preview right there if you're talking about a profitability problem. Alternatively, you can just say, I'm looking at 3 primary areas. I'd like to explore category A, B, and C. Or I want to look at the industry overall to see if this is our problem or something that everyone else is facing. I want to look at our company in depth in terms of our revenue and cost, and then I want to look at some alternatives. That can be fine. You don't have to fit a pre-established framework, so as long as you're providing a little bit of structure and upfront preview, roadmap, organization, so the interviewer doesn't think that you're just shooting from the hip randomly, piece after piece after piece.